Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your favourite sketch history podcast, Sketchy History. With me this week is Nadja. I have totally blanked on your second name, Nadja.
Mathern.
Mathern. Nadja Mathern. Nadja, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nadja, and my whole qualification for being here is that I'm German.
Yes, that's true. And that we know each other, obviously.
We do, obviously.
I've yet to invite
Nepotism.
a stranger on the pod.
No.
Yeah.
Mm.
But it could happen. Who's to say? So what we have decided to do as our topic today was I had the bright idea of, since Nadia is German, we talk about the unification of Germany.
Yay!
Great idea, I hear you say. However, we talk to each other when we meet up in my delightful studio and we get into record and then we go, so which unification of Germany are we doing? And we remember that Germany has been unified twice. So I shall be covering the first unification of Germany from Prussia and various other states into Germany. And then Nadia, you will be covering...
Yeah, the second one that was around 89 and is still being dealt with at the moment in a lot of ways in Germany.
That's interesting. Gonna like getting to that. Usual format is we tend to start with me and then move on. And let's go chronologically. That makes more sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's make it orderly.
Yes.
And efficient. The German way.
I didn't want to say anything. But there we are. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'll start off then with talking about the unification of Germany in 1871. I'm mostly going to cover it through the frame of one man, Otto von Bismarck. A man with so many titles by the end of his life that in British newspapers he was referred to as the man of many titles. I know it should be more punchy or funny than that, but British newspapers in the 1800s were pretty sort of straight to the point. But there we go. So Otto was in charge of Prussia. He became in charge of Prussia in the 1850s. And his secret goal the whole time, everybody reckons, was to unify Germany proper. That's to unify all German speakers. And what happened is he orchestrated a series of wars. He is claimed, by the way, to be one of the best politicians ever to have lived. And I think it's interesting that the mark of that is that he unified a country through warfare. But there we go. Not necessarily a great mark of the kind of people politicians are. But what Otto did is he orchestrated a war with Denmark because... it all gets very complicated. There was a monarchical succession in Denmark, but the monarch of Denmark also had claims to land in Saxony and Wittenberg. So Otto promised the princes or other royalty in Saxony and Wittenberg that he would make sure that Denmark gave their land back to Germans and not to Danes. As a German, is there a lot of Danish tension?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Actually, I would say, a lot of German people go on holiday in Denmark, and a lot of Danish people speak German.
Okay, so clearly 200 years later, they have all this has been forgiven. But what happened was, hopefully, what happened was Prussia in alliance with Austria and a lot of the other German states then declared war on Denmark. It was a relatively swift war with relatively few battles or casualties. Essentially, the Prussian and Austrian armies just marched up into Denmark and the Danes went, whoa, hey, steady down. We take it back. You can have Saxony and Wittenberg. We don't even really care. They're quite a long way from Denmark. We're Danish. Have a pastry. I don't know if they said that. Hans Christian's writing a lovely story about a mermaid. Do you want to hear it? No, they probably didn't say that at all. So then what happened was, after that, Austria became concerned about the power of their former ally Prussia, and Prussia thought that Austria was, especially Otto, thought that Austria was getting more of the sort of German sphere of influence, that it was becoming the more powerful country of all the German-speaking nations. Those tensions led to the Austro-Prussian War, where Austria and Prussia declared war on each other. It seemed pretty clear, if you were to look at the military at this point, it seemed pretty clear that Otto von Bismarck and the Prussians were not going to do very well. They didn't have any military force on their side. All of the other little German nations that had been formerly the whole Holy Roman Empire and are just sort of dotted about between. If you want to picture it on a map, listener, Prussia's sort of the top bit of Germany, going a little bit into Poland. And then Austria is the bottom. Well, below the bottom of Germany today, where Austria lies today, except it was bigger because it was an empire at the time. But all the nations in between were sort of small, and they were mostly on Austria's side. Prussia basically just preempted the war a little bit, sent troops straight into Austria very quickly. Otto von Bismarck was very certain. He told his generals, only fight battles you can win, run away from ones you can't. So Austrian forces would sort of head on in towards Prussians. Prussians would retreat until they got to a tactical point where they could fight back. Also, Otto von Bismarck contacted the Italians, because they had recently unified into one nation, and they wanted some lands that Austria had claimed to. So the pair of them worked together, splitting Austria's forces. Otto's troops were well on their way towards Vienna, and lots of his generals were advocating for like a really hard victory. They wanted victory parades, they wanted lots of reparations to be paid, they wanted it to be like severe. But Otto said, if we're going to make my master plan work. This is said with retrospect. He never sort of talked about a master plan, but everybody reckons, lots of historians think, that he wanted the unification of Germany at this point. So he made a very conscious choice to do a very soft victory for Austria. So there were no parades, there were no reparations. He essentially just said, everybody that's your ally now, they need to be our allies. And that's it. And Austria complied, and that was all fine. As soon as that war finished, within sort of a month of it finishing, Otto von Bismarck wrote in his personal diary, a Franco-German war is now inevitable. I have laid the cards for it. They will be nervous about the power of the Prussians, and they will attack. And he was like, this will be my perfect opportunity for the unification of Germany. So when you look at it like that, this is a man who's only been in power about 20 years, but somehow he's managed to go, I have a master plan. It involves a united Germany under Prussia, and he's achieved that through two little skirmish wars, and now the main event, the Franco-Prussian War, which he wins astonishingly quickly. The French were very powerful militarily. They were under Napoleon III, I think. Yes, Napoleon III. And they had an impressive empire, etc., etc. And Prussia essentially didn't have an empire at all. It had a series of alliances in Central Europe, and they were looking at maybe conquering sections of East Africa, but compared to the imperial power of France, like, that's insignificant. But Otto von Bismarck writes again in his personal diary that if France were to attack them solely with their forces at home, Prussia would win outright. And I'm not going to focus on the Prussian War too much, but needless to say, the Germans win in a landslide. And the French are hoping during the treaty process that they can make it a bit more complicated, because they'll be treating with Prussia, but also with all the little kingdoms like Bavaria and Saxony, etc., etc. To absolutely throw this on its head, Otto von Bismarck declares, at the Palace of Versailles no less, that he has decided and treated with these various nations, and they will unify into the Empire of Germany. And Otto himself gets the title, I think he's High Chancellor of the German Empire. This is on top of the fact that he's Foreign Secretary for Prussia and Prime Minister and President of Prussia. The man collected all the power, essentially, and then managed to unify all of Germany. He also then claimed some of Alsace-Lorraine from France as repayments, and Germany sets itself up as a very powerful nation in the centre of Europe. Of course, the unification of Germany then sets the stage for everything to come. That being the First World War, then the Second World War. It's really a domino effect, and I think Otto von Bismarck definitely wasn't thinking about the consequences of his actions when he did this, when he united quite a lot of the German-speaking population. Austria remained separate. At one time he had a plan to include Austria, but he decided that since it was an empire in its own right, and it was also more involved in Eastern Europe with non-German speaking populations who didn't want to get involved. So that is how on the 18th of January 1871, in the halls of mirrors at the Chateau Versailles, the new German Empire, of a federation of 25 countries and states, was created. And it's a nation that lasted all the way up until it was split again.
Yes.
Cool. On that note, we'll probably dot to us doing some sketches, which we'll do later. Guten Tag, willkommen one and all to my emergency cabinet meeting about my next plan. How are you all feeling?
Oh, well, I'm always feeling good about a plan.
I'm very bored because the war is over.
Oh, Minister for War, I have news for you. I had a 3-part war plan. War number 1 with Denmark, war number 2 with Austria, and now war number 3 with France.
Huzzah!
Oh, very good,
What?
Minister for War.
Why? Why would you do that?
Well,
We-
I think it's about time that we showed the French that we are a serious military power.
And it's
Have
ages
you-
since we had the last war.
Have
That's
you
not
thought
true.
about all the cost this will have?
Yeah.
Not only to our country, but also, basically, to all
We
of my
must,
ministry.
we must forge a new nation in iron and blood. And I think the best way to do that is by
Why?
fighting the French.
Why do you have to be such a spoilsport? Otto comes up with these great plans, and then all you have to do is
great plans.
criticize,
Always-
and you say, oh, it's so much money,
Why
and so
does
much
it always have to
organization.
be about the French? We don't need the French. We're just organizing ourselves internally. And we want-
I think that fighting a big power and another nation on our doorstep, such as the French, will be very good for the morale, not just of us, but for our other German allies. And I think
Will
it'll
it?
make everybody see that we have
Yeah,
common
my
cause.
morale
Will
is
it?
really low at the moment because I haven't fought any wars.
Yeah, you should be more like the Minister for War. The Minister for War is always on board with my plans.
I'm not the Minister for War, though. I'm the Minister for Internal Affairs.
Yeah.
And the internal affair clearly is that you don't know which border will...
No.
But maybe you should just focus on organizing the internal affairs
Listen.
and let me manage the wars.
Listen,
Well,
internal affairs, I have
yes.
something to tell you. It's very, very important, okay?
Important.
You want to lean in closer?
Is it very important?
It's very important. Minister for
Is
War.
it
do you want to-
concerning me?
Well, partially. Minister for
Why
War.
does it always have to be about you?
Well, this is what this country is about, is the internal of the country,
Ministers,
not...
if we could not
Nine,
argue...
it's about how good
Ministers,
they are at winning wars.
Ministers, I demand your attention! Now listen to me very carefully. I have an exceptional plan that will involve both of you. For
Exceptional.
it involves both war and internal affairs.
Wunderbar.
At the end of the war, Minister for War, we will expand our internal affairs, Minister for Internal Affairs.
How? How will we do that?
What I will do is I will tell our allies in the other German principalities and free cities
What will you tell them?
that we should be one nation. After crushing the French, inevitably, as my Minister for War is so very good at war,
Wunderbar.
yeah, we will crush the French, and the Germans will want to be one nation, whole and strong. Do you understand?
But what happens if they don't?
Oh, they will.
Do we get to wage more war?
Nine. After this, there will be no more war. I am certain of it. We will have a united Germany and no more war. But internal affairs,
We will?
this means that your internal affairs will, of course, now cover all of Germany.
All?
All the way to Bavaria in the south.
All the way.
Yeah,
Everything.
yeah,
Everything.
yeah.
You mean including, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Are you
And-
ready, internal affairs, for such an expansion of your office?
I'm gonna have the first draft on your table in 3 hours.
Magnificent.
It
I
will-
expect it to be signed in triplicate as per our usual procedure.
Well, triplicate or more.
We could always do it
will
more.
Not be disappointed. I will have my best team on it, and we will divulge in all the different cities, and we will once more be strong in paperwork.
Yeah, it's the best way to be strong. All right, Minister for War, are you preparing for the war?
Yeah.
Good.
That's what I do.
Minister for Internal Affairs, you will be prepared for the new internal affairs.
Yes, I'm very ready.
Sehr gut. In that case, I deem this meeting adjourned. Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Wiedersehen.
I imagine it's going to be Nadia, myself, and Ed, who is in the room but is remaining a silent partner.
Almost like me.
Almost like you. Cool. So, yes, that is the first unification of Germany. And then that leads into the second, if you would like to start talking about that now.
Yes, and I think the second unification of Germany, I'm going to approach that kind of in a quite opposite way to you, which I think is befitting, because you focused on the one person of Otto von Bismarck. And of course, there were a lot of kind of politicians and personalities that were quite crucial to the second unification of Germany. But actually, the most important force were the people.
Yes.
The people of Eastern Germany who protested and went on the streets and basically caused, kind of like a peaceful revolution for Germany to be unified again.
For a second, I thought you were going to talk about the particular famous German actor that we've mentioned on the podcast who claims to have brought down the Berlin Wall.
Oh, yes, of course. David Hasselhoff, who famously brought down the
we were so
Berlin
close,
Wall.
so close. One day,
He's been looking for freedom.
one day we'll do a Hoff episode.
Yeah.
We'll just talk about the Hoff.
Knight Rider. Yeah.
It's a film with a talking car. What more could you want? Anyway,
I don't want anything more. No.
fair.
And I think basically the thing, obviously, I myself was born, in Western Germany and not in Eastern Germany. And my whole family was kind of like very far away from that because we didn't even have relatives in Eastern Germany. Whereas
so whereabouts in Germany do you hail from, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind you asking. I'm from Baden-Württemberg, which is southern Germany,
Yes,
kind of southwest. And
that's the only bit of Germany I visited, actually.
Is it?
Yeah.
Where did you go?
We went to Baden-Baden.
Oh, nice.
Which is,
that is nice.
It's
Yeah.
little town.
One day I'll show you my hometown and the small village I'm from, and you'll understand why I escaped to London. No, nothing. So yeah, and obviously I am actually quite aware in talking about this that even though I'm German and you'd think it's probably more my place to talk about this than yours, I kind of really feel like it's not really my place to talk about that part of German history because my family wasn't like that kind of involved with it, even though I do have friends, where like kind of their parents or grandparents, have stories about how, they were on different sides of the wall and how difficult that was or how people tried to get out over the embassies and things like that. And I do think what's most striking about that second unification, that even though, there'd been quite a lot of hoping in general in Germany for unification and a lot of people, of course, wanting the wall to come down, no one really believed it would happen, especially this quickly. And it kind of almost happened overnight in a way.
Yeah.
And people were like quite surprised by it. I actually listened to an interview a German journalist did with someone, and he himself was actually in Poland with the German Chancellor and Vice Chancellor. He was reporting on their visit of Poland when certainly they were, talking about something that was kind of like so far removed from what was going on in Berlin, and suddenly they had got reports about, there was this press conference in Berlin, and they said basically the borders are now open, and people are starting to run to the wall and are seeing if that's the case. And it is actually quite amazing because there were a lot of like East soldiers that were still stationed there and they didn't know what was going on. They then were told, we were just told the borders were open, and it is really lucky that none of them lost their nerve and shot someone, because it could have escalated into a very violent...
Was it an order from Moscow? Was it an order from within East Berlin? Because obviously the communists had half of the country, and the West, he says, in brackets, America, France, the UK had occupied West Germany and then sort of let it
Yeah.
go a little bit. My belief is that the communists sort of really, the Stalinist regime and the USSR had sort of kept its claws in East Germany.
Yes.
What was it in '89? Was it just a
Well,
sudden?
but there was.
We're going to let it go.
Well, there was lots of different reasons. I mean, there was Gorbachev, who actually he wanted, a lot of modern changes. He wanted to modernize Eastern Germany, and I mean, the whole thing is as well. Eastern Germany was really like on the verge of collapse. They were basically, I mean, financially, they were just bankrupt completely, and they needed help from the outside, and they basically, I mean, there were lots of different reasons, but the thing that happened at that press conference, it wasn't a plan for it to go that way, but basically someone was asking, so they were trying to loosen the restrictions and people getting out, because the pressure was getting immense, because so many people were like, we want to leave, and obviously they were saying, okay, we're going to try and make the GDR kind of like a modern, socialist state where people can leave, because they didn't want to create the impression, people are imprisoned here and are not allowed to get out. So they tried to kind of solve it, and some of them still had in their mind, if we just let these people who want to leave, and then we kind of modernize the state, we'll kind of like get over this crisis. But the problem is all these politicians who actually were willing to change the system, it kind of came too late. They kind of like the population had already run away with the idea that they were now fed up.
Oh wow!
And there were. I mean, I watched a documentary the other day, and it's quite amazing that after all that political stuff happened, and there was a time where it wasn't quite clear what was really going to happen, what was really going on, which laws are really in place. It was quite mad that people suddenly dared to say to policemen in the street, like, you have nothing to say to me, and things crazy. Like that. And,
so, like, once that press conference happened and people dash to the wall and they demolish it, don't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was then one, I've forgotten which post it was on the Berlin Wall, but one of the people in charge there then was like, well, I have to make a decision, and he opened it up, and after one was open, and everyone just went through, and it was this crazy, like, it was very emotional, of course, as well.
And was that confined just to Berlin, or was it like up and down the country? Were people suddenly moving from East Germany into West just because they could?
Well, I mean, before that happened, of course, a lot of people tried to kind of flee through, embassies in the East. Yeah. And of course, there was the big incident in the embassy in Prague. I don't know if you ever saw pictures of that, because so many people went to the Western Germany embassy in Prague. Wow. And basically, once they were on the grounds of that embassy, they were officially, kind of like in West Germany. And then, but there was a problem. There were thousands of people there. Like, you can watch videos, and people were there like with their families. There were, the entire embassy. People were sitting on the balconies in the garden. There were. It was completely random. More people who climbed over the fences every day, and it was just a situation where no one knew what to do, really. And then there's the most famous half sentence any German politician ever spoke, Genscher. He basically came to the embassy to tell those people that they kind of talked it out, and they're now allowed to officially go to Western Germany. And he kind of started that sentence and they all just started cheering, like it was just thousands of people cheering, and with that, and then those people were put on trains to be brought to West Germany, but actually they had to, with the way the trains were, they had to go back through the East, and a lot of people got really worried, and they were like, because they didn't have papers, So they actually had people from Western Germany go onto the trains with them, so that because they were scared of what if they do stop us again and then we have to go back and everything was for nothing, and that didn't turn out to be right. But the crazy thing was, people then in Eastern Germany, they started hearing about these trains and about what happened in these embassies, and they started to just go to the train stations where they knew the trains would have to come through, and they were like, we'll just try and get onto the train, and that got quite rowdy, and like, you know, the police closed down train stations. It's actually quite it's quite amazing, because, you know, that's something that, you know, I learned about later in life. It's not something I was like very aware of, you know, growing up, and how close it really was. And of course, like, one massive thing that is still being uncovered is the you know, Stasi, the secret service of Eastern Germany, who basically spied on their people. And it's amazing, you know, I mean, there's a reason why there's so many films about it, actually. Because it is quite, in terms of storytelling, it often sounds like that must be invented, in terms of how people were spying on their own family members, on their neighbors, on and they had these like massive amounts of just like espionage documents, and the crazy thing was, when everything was kind of coming down and people kind of stormed the Stasi Central, something happened that is actually, for the first time in history, people say that when kind of a secret service was brought down, they had so little time to destroy their documents that actually it's the biggest kind of archive of a secret service uncovered in the world. Because usually they all destroy everything, and there's still, to this day, I mean, we're talking 30 years later now, and there's still a massive archive of both unopened documents and also kind of like massive bags of shredded documents that they are still trying to put together. Where basically the kind of like civil rights activists just kind of ran in as soon as it was clear that, you know, they were now done, ran in and tried to save the documents that were being shredded, and kind of like just kind of enclosed it all somewhere. And people now can from Eastern Germany, they can now ask for their own files, because, you know, there were files on most people being kept. And so they can demand to have their own files opened and have a look at them, and it's ridiculous. I mean, what they've recorded, you know, what they and it's really interesting. And there's also a really funny, actually, book and film called Herr Lehmann, which is actually about a guy in West Berlin who's kind of like leading this slacker life and just working in a bar or whatever, and then suddenly the wall comes down, and it's about like that moment in history of everyone just being like, what just happened, like, and it's quite fun.
So that all happens, and then the Germanys are unified.
Yes.
How quickly does that occur?
Well, basically kind of within a year. I mean, of course,
that's fast.
Yeah, I mean, of course there were, you know, lots of different talks and contracts, and you know, there's some debates whether, you know, who caused what and what was really the reason. And, you know, there's of course the German Chancellor of the time, Helmut Kohl. He's very much, you know, the unification chancellor, and, you know, due to him. And I do think he was very clever in the way that he was careful at times where he needed to be. You know, he wasn't like making a lot of statements that were dangerous when it could have still like gone into violence.
Tipped it the other way.
And tipped the other way. And the crazy thing as well is that usually if you unify a country, you know, you first like draw all the contracts, and then later on, you know, maybe you talk about you know, having unified economy or whatever. But actually, one of the first things that happened was that the Western money was introduced into the East, which was what money was actually one of the most important things, because that was basically also because they needed money more than anything, really. And at first, that there was that massive joy, and obviously as well a lot of business people who kind of then did something in the right moment in the East. They were made people, because when they opened shops there at the right moment, like with all this stuff that previously didn't exist. And it was quite crazy how apparently people started spending Western money in East Berlin before it was officially like there.
They just got their hands on it.
Yeah,
and
it was just kind of like this crazy, emergence of like, we're free now, we can have all these things, we couldn't have before. And there was also a lot of kind of satire going on, and actually a lot of people in Eastern Germany felt quite hurt in some ways as well, because there was this thing about like bananas, because they used to not have bananas, and then all these bananas were brought in, but it was also a case of like people then coming in from the West into the East to kind of watch them,
Right.
and they did say like, are we the Sioux? Like, people are watching us eat bananas because we've not
had them for ages.
Yeah.
I guess that leads into a question I was wanting to ask. So obviously, with the unification I'm talking about, there was an element for which for a while, and I guess still in southwest Germany, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a real sense if somebody is Bavarian, they are Bavarian first, German second.
Yes.
And there's they talk about that during the unification. The first time around, that there's a big sense that if you're Prussian, you are Prussian first and German second, etc., etc.
Oh, that still exists.
Yeah, but my other question was, does that tie into the reunification of East and West? Was there a sense for a while that somebody was, I don't know...
Ossie and Bessie. It's like...
But also that they were sort of... Is there then a middle ground where they are like Bavarian, West German, German?
Well, that's actually a difficult question to answer, because obviously, as well, like since the Second World War, like how you identify as a German is a very
difficult question,
question.
I imagine,
and which I personally like, being born much later. I personally always felt an unease about being German, which is quite interesting as well. That I feel like I was brought up with an unease about my nationality, and because I actually have dual nationality, I'm Swiss as well. Depending on where I travel, I will say I'm Swiss.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Where, if you don't mind saying, where do you go where you say you're Swiss Nadia as opposed to German Nadia?
Well,
did you used to say it in England?
I used to say it in England sometimes when I was living in Bristol for a year, when I was starting to get fed up with the same comments every time I was out. Like, drunk English people would always make the same comments about me being German, and after a while I was just like, I'll just say I'm Swiss.
Yeah.
Like, I don't do it anymore now, but I do think London is different anyways.
Yes,
so, yeah.
It's a much more multicultural place.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting, isn't it? Because obviously both unifications form a nation, the nation of Germany, but the character of both Germanys that we're talking about are very different.
Very different. But
that comes with time frame, because obviously if you were to look at France or Britain or Spain during the 1800s, they would also be hyper-nationalistic imperial nation states that have since relaxed a little bit. And
it's quite interesting because you mentioned Bavaria as well. There's still a conservative party in Bavaria that just exists in Bavaria.
Oh.
Because obviously we still have kind of like a federal system in Germany where every like kind of state has its own kind of government locally.
Yeah.
And actually as well, a school system, it's not the same everywhere in in Germany. So you have so Bavarian school system is different to where I went to school.
Okay.
And there's also a bit of like let's say, like a snobbery going on towards each other, where
okay.
people are like, well, if you have A levels from this one, that's better
That's
than
better
if you
than
have
A-levels
A
over
levels
that.
from the other one,
Because does
kind
that
of thing.
include curriculum and stuff? Is
Yes.
Is it that deep? So they're really.
Yeah.
It's more like states in the US then than it is. Well, or
Kind of, yeah.
than it would be,
No,
let's say, counties in the UK. So
Yeah.
in terms of it being unified as a nation, it does still have very strong local feeling.
Oh, yeah.
Those old nations that existed for hundreds and hundreds of
Yeah.
years in the Holy Roman Empire and then before that,
Even-
I guess.
Yeah, you said, I told you I'm from Baden-Württemberg.
Yeah.
It even goes further than that. Baden-Württemberg obviously is one, but
Did it used
there's
to be
still
Baden-Württemberg?
there's
Wow.
still a kind of like adversity going on between Baden and Württemberg. And I
Amazing.
remember my first boyfriend was from Baden and I'm from Württemberg because
right.
we actually met on holiday, and like. My friends would have like derogatory term for him because of where he was
he's
from. And they
Wow.
would like, his friends would make fun of me and stuff like that, even though it was literally just 100 kilometers.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like there were still these like there are still these old identities going on some level. And about Eastern and Western Germany,
Yeah.
that definitely is very much still a thing, and that you can say, oh, someone is Aussie, like kind of like Eastie or Wessie, and it's not as strong as it used to be. But actually, of course, you also notice when you meet people. Like I work as a tour guide in London. And I remember last year I once had a family from former Eastern Germany on my tour, and it was quite a different tour in terms of because they had their mum with them, and I could tell she was quite anxious about like being in London. And then I realized after a while, oh, it's because she doesn't speak any English. Everyone in the Western German school system is taught
Yeah.
English, but she learned Russian in school. Like she has no clue.
Yeah.
And it's quite mad that the older generation from Eastern Germany they all speak Russian, and like I don't know a word of Russian. It's quite a
that's
quite a kind of crazy thing, and
Yeah, that's very interesting. Because obviously now, I guess, the whole school system in Germany, like a lot of the European countries, you speak English from quite an early age, don't you?
Yeah.
So I guess has that gone? Is that in all of Germany now? There's no longer a divide. Obviously.
Yeah.
But I guess you're right in terms of a couple of generations back. That the power that they were kneeling to was Russia, so they obviously learned Russian. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I hadn't even considered that. So you can still see, if you like, the scars of that reunification even now.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, of course, as well, there's a lot of, the question that at the moment, there's a rise of the right again in Germany as well. And,
Sigh.
and sigh. Yeah. But, it's quite, a lot of where the problems is in Eastern Germany, like for good reason, because, that's where a lot of the unemployment is, and I mean, I guess every country in Europe has kind of the similar things going on at the moment. But yeah, it's crazy how that identity is kind of like it all gets merged up. I remember when I was a teenager, and to me, it was quite clear what is left and what is right, and that kind of thing. And then I watched a documentary about like subcultures in Eastern Germany, and it was quite crazy because the punks there had Nazi symbols on them just because it was a forbidden thing, and they tried to provoke whatever they could provoke, and I was like, that's mad.
Yeah, it doesn't feel punk. When you think punk, you think left-leaning.
Yeah,
usually, don't you think possibly communist symbols.
Yeah.
It's odd, that sort of, it's about what's forbidden where.
Yeah. And so, it's quite crazy. And also, of course, that whole euphoria of, East and West is together again. And at first, there were a few months of everyone just like being yay, and it was a massive party. But of course, very quickly, Eastern Germany, they used to have a safe job. You know, they were guaranteed work, and then suddenly they were all out of work, and they were like, well, we have, and then they weren't skilled in a way that, like, you know, Western companies needed it or whatever it was, and they realized, well, even if they put all that money in there, they can't compete, and because obviously they had a completely different system going on, and it was quite scary for a lot of people as well. And of course there were a lot of people who were like, oh, it was way better, you know, in the old system, because we all had a job, and you know.
Cool. Well, on that note, in the interest of keeping this podcast in time, which I'm sometimes good at and sometimes not, we'll probably hand over to our sketch artists, which will inevitably be me, Nadia, and Edward, and hopefully we'll do something funny for you. Oma, Opa!
Come in. 1 minute. Come in, boy, come in.
Oma, Opa! I have the most marvelous news. It is amazing news!
Hello?
Guten Tag!
What is he saying?
Who is this boy?
It's your grandson.
Andre, your grandson.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, look,
You-
I have...
What is he saying, woman? Tell him to speak louder. I
I
can't hear.
have amazing news, Opa!
What?
Amazing news!
What's
He
new?
has newspapers.
9 news!
You need to speak into my ear trumpet, boy.
No, look!
Yeah.
The communist regime, it has fallen!
Who's fallen over?
9! The regime! The communist regime!
What is he saying, woman? Elsa, tell me what
Otto
is he
is back!
saying?
9!
Otto is
Not Otto
finally
again. Oh,
back.
God.
Ah, what a man.
Who is she
What a
talking about?
mustache.
She's talking about
All my
Bismarck.
dreams.
He's dead, woman. He's been dead for over 100 years.
Wait, no, that's not what I'm talking about. The Berlin Wall, it has fallen. I helped to take it apart.
He's
Germany is
alive.
reunited again.
Elsa,
He's
what is he
alive.
saying?
We have a united Germany.
Germany is finally as Otto always dreamed.
What is she saying? What are you saying? Speak louder. I'm
Together.
deaf, woman.
Yeah.
Everyone who speaks German together.
9, just East and West Germany.
Finally.
The Austrians aren't involved, and you know, but that's fine.
Right, you shut up, woman. Talk into my ear trumpet, boy. I cannot hear you.
East and West Germany are reunited.
Reunited?
Yeah.
Oh, we've done this before.
Where
It's
is
old
my
news.
soup? Did you want some soup?
9, Omi. What do you mean we've done this before?
We did it when did we do it? In 1878. Old news, boy.
We
It didn't work. Then we had the Kaiser, and then we had Herr Hitler, and then we
What
had the
did we
Russians.
do?
And it didn't work. Come back another time when
What
you've got
did we
something
do?
interesting to tell me.
What did we do,
Well,
Hans?
I was very excited to
Oh,
talk to you both, and now I shall simply take the cookies by the door and leave. I'll be the same.
What did we do?
Oh, shut up.
And we're back. Cool. Well, just wrapping up then. First, I'd say thank you very much, Nadia, for coming in today and talking about one of the unifications of Germany. It was actually really interesting, and I'm actually very glad that we came up with the 2 different ones. I've sort of very much enjoyed the similarities and differences between them, and sort of talking about how yes, they've been unified as a nation, but there are still, you know, the disunity is still present.
Yeah.
Even in their unification, there's still, you can't get rid of an identity. You can't just go, oh, you're an East German today, but you're properly German tomorrow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It is interesting. And I think, I mean, every country has it to a certain extent. You know, you also have like regional accents and dialects connected with a certain identity and that type of thing going on. But generally speaking, yeah, I mentioned this to you beforehand. I've always felt more European than German.
Yeah.
And the first time I personally have felt German was after I moved to England.
So it's that
Yeah.
sort of, yes, once you're taken out of context, you suddenly feel the need to wrap that bit of your personality in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never felt particularly German until I left it, because I thought, oh, you know, I'm not like the other Germans, you know, I felt a bit special and everything. and I've realised how regular German I am
Yeah.
since I moved to London.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Done. All right. Cool. Other than that, I would like to say thank you to you, dear listener, for listening this far. Thank you for liking and sharing. Thank you to everyone that shares. Telling a friend is literally the best way you can make this podcast spread, and it's actually really great for me and for everybody that joins in. I think we all have a good
Yay.
time, and you're helping us do that by listening and sharing. So thank you very much. Also, I'd like to thank Edward, because inevitably he'll be in our sketches, and he's been here every week, and he's incredibly supportive. And I'm not just saying that because he can hear me right now. Cool. All right. And with that, let's wrap this episode up. So that's goodbye from me and goodbye from Nadia.
Goodbye, goodbye.
See you later.
See ya.
All right, cool.
Here are some details.
Oh, for goodness sake. I did not say okay, Google. This is the worst start to the podcast. What is going on? This is the worst start.
Oh, did something go wrong?
Yes.
No problem. You can send feedback.
Oh, I will. I'll be talking to your manager, Google.
Just turn her off.
I can't turn her off. She's not got an off button.
That happens to
phone
me
off,
as well
Boo.
sometimes.
No, but I need
Yeah.
to read the research that's on my phone. This has been an abysmal start to the podcast.